So there is an error in thinking that has become extraordinarily common in the West that I think leads to so many bad results. This error in thinking was made clear yesterday, actually, by Pope Francis. So there's a lot of controversy over something that Pope Francis said in his 60 Minutes interview. He said a lot of controversial things. One of the things that he said, Pope Francis is being translated here. And what he says about human beings is controversial, to say the least. And you can interpret it in a way that is friendlier to Catholic theology, as far as I'm aware. And you can interpret it in a way that is less friendly to Catholic theology. Here is the Pope.
When you look at the world, what gives you hope?
Todo.
Everything.
Uno ve tragedias,
You see tragedies,
pero ve
but you also see so many beautiful
tantas
things.
cosas lindas. Uno ve madres heroicas,
You see heroic mothers,
hombres heroicos,
heroic men who
hombres
have
que
hopes
tienen
and dreams,
ilusión, mujeres que miran
women who
adelante.
look to the future.
Eso a mí me da
That
mucha
gives me a lot
esperanza.
of hope.
La gente quiere vivir.
People want to live.
La gente
People
va
forge
adelante.
ahead. And people
La
are
gente
fundamentally
es
good.
fundamentalmente buena. Todos somos
We are all
fundamentalmente
fundamentally
buenos.
good.
Por ahí somos un poco
Yes, there
pícaros,
are some rogues and
pecadores,
sinners,
pero
but the
el
heart
corazón
itself
es bueno.
is good.
Okay, so there are a couple of ways to read that statement. I want to explain 3 ways of reading human nature. In America, we are incredibly fortunate to have brave men and women who volunteer to serve in our military. They dedicate their lives to protecting our freedom and ensuring our nation's security. These men and women voluntarily lay their lives on the line for us. When their service ends, transitioning to civilian life can be rough, especially given the current economic climate. This is why Pure Talk proudly supports the America's Warrior Partnership. Since 2014, America's Warrior Partnership has worked with tens of thousands of veterans in its quest to stop veteran suicide and help veterans and their families live the purposeful lives they deserve. You can join the fight. New customers who switch to Pure Talk can make a one-time donation matched dollar for dollar by Pure Talk or round up their initial order at checkout. If you're already a Pure Talk customer, you can also make recurring donations by rounding up your monthly bill. Head on over to puretalk.com/Shapiro and make the switch today. Choose a wireless company that shares your values and is half the price of Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile. Visit puretalk.com/Shapiro to upgrade your cell phone service to America's most dependable 5G network. I've been using Pure Talk myself for years. Now you're doing something good when you join Pure Talk as well. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Again, that is puretalk.com/Shapiro to get started. Okay, so the traditional Judaic way of reading human nature, and again, I'm a Jew, so I know more about this than I do about the alternatives. The traditional Judaic way of reading human nature is that human beings are not inherently good. Human beings have an internal battle. That battle is between what we call the Yetzer HaTov, the good desire, and Yetzer Hara, which is the bad desire. And these two things are fighting with each other all the time. And it is up to us to try to cultivate the good desire at the expense of the bad desire. If you do it well, presumably, you can even turn the bad desires toward the good. And that's the Judaic perspective. Then there is the Catholic perspective. The Catholic perspective is interesting. Traditionally, I'm quoting Thomas Aquinas here, the Catholic perspective is that human beings are inherently good in the sense that they were made in God's image. But through original sin, human beings were then cursed with the capacity for sin. That capacity for sin is dominant and powerful. And original sin was only expunged with the death of Jesus. And I have Catholics in my office who will correct me if I'm wrong about this. But that is not quite the same thing as the secularist idea. The secularist idea is that human beings are inherently good. And not only are they inherently good, most human beings are not even sinful. Most human beings are not even sinful. And that is at odds with both the Judaic and the traditionally Christian view of human nature. And again, the traditionally Christian worldview on human nature is that while the human heart might be made in the image of God, meaning that on a fundamental soul level, the soul of human beings are good, the Bible is replete with statements about how sinful human beings are. Right? Whether you're talking about the book of Mark, where Jesus said no one is good except God alone, or Romans, where he said none are good, no, not one, or Jeremiah, where the prophet says the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, or the Psalms, 51:5, where it says, behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin my mother conceived me. And the traditionally religious view, at the very least, is that the human capacity for sin is extraordinarily strong. And that means that most people, in fact, all people, are inherently sinners. Now, the solution to that differs between Judaism and Christianity. The solution to that for Judaism is perform the mitzvot, act in virtuous ways, and you will become more virtuous, and you will dominate over sin. As God says to Cain at the beginning of the book of Genesis. Right? Sin crouches at your door, but if you're strong, if you will it, you can dominate sin. You can rule over it. That's the sort of Judaic perspective. The Christian perspective, it is only through the grace of Christ that you can expunge that original sin, giving you the capacity for a free will so that you can conquer sinful nature. And then there's the secularist point of view, which is different from both of these and is a misread of Judeo-Christian tradition. And that basic idea is that human beings are not only inherently good, not only is the heart inherently good, sin is not something internal to human beings. It's not even a force that human beings fight on an individual level, that sin only exists in systems, not in individual human beings. There's no such thing as sin. Human beings have a nature, and that nature is inherently good. And if you consider something sinful, it's probably because you are the problem. You see this in secularist society all the time. If two people love each other, how can it be a sin? If you do something bad to another person, well, that's just relativistic. It's relativistic in morality. Who are you to judge? Right? All of that is a misread of traditional Judeo-Christian doctrine. All of it. Okay, but that widespread secular perception that human beings are inherently good and that the only problem with human beings, that the systems above them are a problem, leads to two incredibly false conclusions. One, human beings generally agree on right and wrong. This is a lie. It is not true. It is fundamentally false. Human beings do not agree on right and wrong. There are very few things that most human beings agree on, like murder is wrong. And even that, traditionally, has to be bounded by the tribe, because it turns out that people in tribes are pretty open about being fine with murdering people who are in other tribes. Human beings do not, at a fundamental level, agree on wide aspects of right and wrong, at least not once it comes to outside the tribe. The second fundamental assumption that arises from this idea that human beings are good is that all it requires is better human institutions and an organizing effort to effectuate right over wrong. Progress is the effectuation of this attempt. Right? That is the basic left-wing theology when it comes to curing the sin of the world. Again, the Jewish theology in curing the sin of the world is act better, perform mitzvot. The Catholic and Christian theology is find Christ, and that will cause you it will heal your soul, and you will be a better person for that. And then there is the secularist version of what to do about human sin, which is that sin does not abide at the level of the individual. Sin only abides at the level of the society. Right? This is the Marxist materialist idea that the only reason that people are bad is because the systems under which they live are inherently bad and corrupt. And therefore, if we can cure those systems, then magically humanity will be absolutely transformed. This is written in the Communist Manifesto. What people mistake about Marxism, it's not an economic philosophy so much as it is a religious philosophy about how you cure the sin of the world by curing the systems at the top level. When put into the language of international politics, this leads to a bizarre belief in international order that is just a lie. It leads to, for example, to the rise of the League of Nations. And if only we can organize all the nations that we all think alike, and if only we can organize along the right lines, we can all be friends. This is why the West is paying homage to Ibrahim Raisi, because they feel in the West that if they are nice enough to Ibrahim Raisi, if they change the systems enough, that people like Ibrahim Raisi and his followers and the mullahs in Iran, they will become inherently good. Magically, they'll become inherently good if we change the international order, because human beings are naturally good. And if we change the order in which we live to expunge all of the various it's really just a miscommunication is all that it is. So Woodrow Wilson, when he was speaking for the League of Nations, said, quote, "There's only one power to put behind the liberation of mankind, and that is the power of mankind as a whole. As a whole." That's stupid. Okay, there is no such thing as, quote unquote, the power of mankind as a whole in pursuit of the broader interests of mankind. It turns out there are lots of human beings. They have lots of different interests. You can see this all the way down to present day. Barack Obama, and what I pointed this out in 2008 when he was running for president, that this was a sick version of how you see the world. It is a wrong worldview with dramatically evil connotations. But this was Barack Obama in Dreams from My Father. And everybody saw this as sort of nice and loose. It was sort of pacifistic and it was sort of hippie-ish. But what he says in this quote from Dreams from My Father, I think is his whole philosophy in a nutshell. And it is a desperately wrong philosophy. Quote, "I have seen the desperation and disorder of the powerless, how it twists the lives of children on the streets of Jakarta or Nairobi in much the same way as it does in the lives of children on Chicago's South Side. How narrow the path is for them between humiliation and untrammeled fury, how easily they slip into violence and despair. I know that the response of the powerful to this disorder, alternating as it does between a dull complacency and, when the disorder spills out of its prescribed confines, a steady, unthinking application of force, of longer prison sentences and more sophisticated military hardware, is inadequate to the task. I know that the hardening of lines, the embrace of fundamentalism and tribe, dooms us all." So in other words, what he is saying there, in fancy, possibly written by Bill Ayer's words, in Dreams from My Father, what he is saying there, which is that all human violence, terrorism, is a result of the systems, of the elites. And those elites are the ones who are creating all of this. And thus, if we create better international organizations run by people like Barack Obama, all violence and terrorism will fall away. We will all have a new community organized day. Now, here's the problem. This is absolute trash. It is nonsense. It is garbage. And it is absolutely going to create more violence in the world. It turns out that these Western delusions of everybody thinking like a Westerner, these Western delusions that everybody has the same value system down deep. By the way, not unique to the left. George W. Bush said many of the same things in 2005 after his reelection. He gave a speech in which he said that the fundamental desire of all human hearts was to be free, which is a lie. It is untrue. The vast majority of people on planet Earth may not wish to live like people in the United States. Recognizing that truth means you have to protect your own interests. But if you believe that all you have to do is massage your enemies, and suddenly they will be your friends, you will be used by your enemies. And that is what we are seeing right now. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.